Hi everyone, Sam here. Welcome to another episode of Azure Snippets. Today we're going to take a look at a governance tool in Azure called Azure Blueprints. Blueprints have been around for a year or so now, and I find they're sometimes a fairly misunderstood component of Azure, and in particular understanding of when to use them and when not to, and what do they do. Blueprints is a tool that allows you to create subscriptions in a way that are already compliant with your corporate policy and governance process. So Blueprints allow you to define a number of resources that can be applied to a subscription, so that when you create a new subscription, you apply a blueprint to it, and all the things you need are already there in that subscription, and it's already set up the way you like it. So in particular, Blueprints allow you to apply RBAC controls, so you can create subscriptions with the appropriate access already defined. They allow you to define policies and assign policies, so you can create a subscription that already has the right policies set up on it. They allow you to create resource groups, and they allow you to create resources in those resource groups. So by using a blueprint, you can you can create a new subscription, apply the blueprint to it, and all of those things will be applied and ready to go with a couple of clicks, rather than having to manually go and apply them. Now the question that always comes up then is, well, how are these different from ARM templates? And the answer to that is, well, you could achieve everything that blueprints do through an ARM template. You can apply RBAC, you can apply policies, you can create resources using ARM templates. It's perfectly possible to do that. The thing blueprints are there for is to make it easier to be able to apply that and to be able to version that process so that you can change it in a governed way in the future. In particular, if you use ARM templates, obviously ARM templates are created by you. They need to be stored somewhere. You need to have a way to apply them to make sure that you're passing in the parameters and so on. With Blueprints, it gives you a way to create this unit of work that is stored in Azure rather than in wherever you keep your ARM templates, is versioned and is available for people to use just by clicking on a button. So you could create the blueprints up front and then deliver them to people who are creating subscriptions or even who want to apply them to existing subscriptions. And you can do that, and you can then also add changes in the future through a versioned manner to allow you to not disrupt existing users using your blueprints but add new features. So they're quite a useful way if you're going to have to deal with a lot of subscriptions, particularly creating a lot of new subscriptions, and you want to apply a process and apply resources to all those subscriptions easily and allow other people to do it. Then Blueprints gives you a tool to build a library of blueprints. You can have multiple blueprints, you can have them for specific purposes, and then use those blueprints to create your subscriptions. And hopefully you'll see that more as we go through the demo and have a look at how they work. So this is the blueprints page here. It is still in preview at the moment. I'm not sure what's going to come out of preview. But what you can do in here basically is create a blueprint, what they call definition, or assign blueprints to subscriptions through here as well. And then obviously you can track assignments so you can see where they've been applied. The easiest way to understand this is for us to just have a look at how do we actually create a blueprint, what is it involved. So we'll click on create. And there are a number of sample blueprints available here in the portal, and you'll find a lot more on GitHub and so on. But we're going to start with a blank blueprint to start with and give it a name. And then you need to store your blueprint somewhere. So blueprints are able to be applied to subscriptions that have the blueprint stored in their hierarchy. So generally where you want to store blueprints is in a management group. Because otherwise, if you store them in a subscription, then only that subscription can use that blueprint. And then if you want to apply it to another subscription, you have to go store it in that subscription and so on. It's a bit painful. So ideally, you want to put these into a management group. You can define blueprints at different levels in your management group. So you could have some global corporate level ones in the root, and then department level ones in sub-management groups, and so on. So we're gonna create some within our IT department management group, and that's what we're going to use. My name isn't valid, so let's just amend that. Okay, so now we need to define the artifacts we're going to put in our blueprint. So these are the resources and the permissions and policies and so on that we want to define in our subscription. So first off, we'll add some permissions. So I want a role assignment, and I want to make sure that whenever a subscription is created, my administrators are granted ownership. Now you can see here you get the option to either put in a value or allow it to be assigned at the time you assign the blueprint. So you can make these generic and then allow whoever is applying the blueprint to the subscription to fill in this field. In this scenario, I want a specific group. So I want to assign my administrators group, which is here, and we'll add that. So now, whenever I apply this blueprint to a subscription, automatically the administrators group will get put into that subscription as an owner. And we can define as many RBAC roles as we want to do in there. The next thing we can then do is assign policies. Click on policy assignment. And you can see here we can assign custom and built-in policies, and we can assign both policies and initiatives. So generally, unless you want to go and assign them one by one, you're probably going to build initiatives to apply to these, to group your policies together. And so we want to add an initiative to enable Azure VM for Azure monitors, so everything gets that enabled. And then we are also going to go and add another policy assignment to ensure that Azure Security Center monitoring is enabled as well. So we'll add those on. So automatically now when we apply this blueprint, all the resources in the subscription are again enabled for Security Center monitoring, and our VMs are going to get set up for Azure Monitor. That'll happen out of the box. You can see here this has got 0 of 3 parameters populated. So if we click on the actual item now, you can see here that these initiatives require parameters. So we can either again fill them in, or we can leave them to be set at the time of the deployment. And so for Security Center, we're going to set a few of these. So I want to make sure that they don't have any choice about enabling monitoring for virtual machines, scale sets, OS vulnerabilities, system updates, OS vulnerabilities, and so on. We're going to make sure that this monitoring is already configured, and so on. So we can make sure now that when they apply this blueprint, these monitoring values are going to be set. They're not going to have any choice in the matter, but some of these ones further down, I'm going to let them actually decide whether or not they want to apply them. And you can see there are quite a lot of parameters required for this initiative. So you need to be a bit careful about how you configure them and which ones you fill in up front to avoid somebody having to go through and select loads of parameters at the time of deployment. So we'll just save that. So you can see here there's 100 parameters for that initiative. So you do have to be a bit careful to make sure that the user experience is reasonable. Okay, so now some more artifacts. We're going to add a resource group. So I want to create a resource group, and we're going to call it core RG, so that every subscription has this core resource group where I'm going to store things in that are core to the subscription, like log analytics, workspaces, some storage accounts for monitoring to use, and so on. Those sort of resources. So we're going to set the name of this. I'm going to enforce that. And I'm going to allow them to select the location. I don't want to force that location. We also have the option to tag the resource group as well here if we want to. I'm not going to use that at the moment, so we'll add that. Then you can see here we've now got an add artifact option underneath the core resource group. So we can come in here and click add artifact, and we can then set policies and roles at the resource group level if we want to, and we can also define an ARM template that we want to deploy. So I now need to provide it with an actual ARM template to deploy. So I've got one here I wrote earlier, very simple one that's just going to deploy a storage account and a log analytics workspace. So I can paste that in, or I can upload the file. And if we go to the parameters tab, it's going to detect any parameters that are passed into my template. And so I'm just passing in here a location name to use, and then a prefix which is used in the naming of the resources. And I'm going to allow both of those to be set at runtime. So we'll click add there as well. Okay, so this is my basic blueprint set up and done. Obviously, you can make these as complicated as you want. You can deploy whatever resources you want, set up permissions and policies however you want. You just need to build them up in here. We can now go ahead and click Save Draft. And then if we go to our blueprint definitions, So we'll adjust our scope to select the IT department. We want to look inside there. And in there we've got our blueprint that we created. And at the moment it's in draft form, so it's not available for anyone to use. So we have the option now to go in and edit and view, and we can then publish the blueprint. And this will make it available for people who have the rights to apply blueprints to be able to actually use it. So we need to give it a version number. So when we edit it in the future, it'll go back into draft state, and then we can change the version as we get older. So this is going to be 1.0. We'll click publish, and that's now ready to use. So now we want to go ahead and apply that to a subscription. So we can go in here again and click on the ellipsis and go to assign blueprint, and this will give us the option of which subscriptions to actually assign this to. So we'll go ahead and pick the subscription we want to apply this to. Now we've got a pay-as-you-go one here. This is a fairly old subscription, but there's nothing in it. There's nothing that says you have to apply blueprints to new subscriptions. You can apply them to existing ones just fine. You obviously just need to be aware that if you apply to existing ones, that you don't conflict with things that are already in them. So we'll click pay-as-you-go. That's the assignment. I want this region to be West Europe for those variables that required a region. And we're going to use Blueprint version 1.0 because that's the only one available. As we move forward with our blueprints and we edit them, there'll be multiple versions and you can choose them in here. Now we have the option here to apply a lock. So this will prevent anyone who doesn't have the rights to remove locks, which is most people, from either deleting or changing these resources. So we can pick to apply a lock or not. I'll leave that off. And then the last thing on here is around managed identity. So what you did when you run this, obviously the blueprint service needs to deploy those resources and make those changes. And so you need to grant that rights to be able to do that. As it says here, it will get temporary owner access to the subscription to be able to do these things and then be removed when it's finished. Now you can let that do it itself with system assigned identity and it will take care of that for you. But if you want it to use an identity that you've created, and maybe you want this identity to be a bit more narrowly scoped than owner, so you want it to only give it the rights it needs, then you can use a user assigned identity and point that as an identity we're going to use. I'm going to leave this blank here. I'll leave this as a system assigned to make life easier. And now we get down to the variables. So we'll need to provide values for ones which don't have default set. So the main one here is a log analytics workspace we're going to have Azure Monitor and VM send their data to, so I've already got that set up, so I'll just put that in there. These are optional, so we don't need to do these. And then the rest of them from the Security Center onboarding, they do all have defaults set, so we can leave them as they are. You can see the ones I enforced at the time of creating the blueprint are not available to change. Then we've got the resource group option, so we're going to put that in West Europe as well. And we're going to pass in the parameters to our ARM template. And that's it. We'll go ahead and assign it. Now, this is a bit of an issue I have with the way blueprints work. So these parameters for the initiative are optional. You see here they're listed as optional. But because they're in the blueprint, the blueprint doesn't actually recognize they're optional and enforces that you put them in there. And there's no way to tell it that you don't want them to be required. You either have to fill them in or you have to specify a default value. So we can go ahead and just put an empty JSON array in here. And that will do the job, but it's slightly annoying. So we'll go ahead and sign that. So that's going to assign the blueprint to the subscription and start the process of applying all those resources and settings that we want to do. Now, this is obviously applied now. It's going to take a little bit longer for it to actually go ahead and do all the work. You can see the states in by going to assigned blueprints, and you can see here we've got the Azure Snippets one assigned to our subscription, and it's in the deploying state. So it's still going through the process of setting up everything up. You can click on it and you can see the status again up here as well, and view the activity log to see what it's doing if you want to. So now that's applied, we can see that it's created the resource group that we asked for, the core RG resource group, and if we looked in that, there should be some resources. There aren't any at the moment because there was an error in my hastily thrown together ARM template, but had I not messed up the ARM template, my resources would be in there. If we go have a look at policies, we can see now that in this subscription we've now got the Security Center and the VM Monitor policies applied. These aren't started yet, so it's still running through the process to do the audit. The rest of these policies have come down from the management group level. And then if we go have a look at subscriptions and look at the access control, you can see we've got the admin group that we defined applied to the subscription itself, and then this is coming from the management group. So you can see that the blueprint has been applied and it's set up all those things for us. And that's pretty much all there is to it. So it really does make life easier for the people who need to onboard those subscriptions, but it also makes it easier for you to enforce your policies by saying, you must use these subscriptions, you must use these blueprints when you onboard subscriptions, and here are a set of blueprints, and here's a development blueprint, here's a production blueprint, and so on. You can go as deep as you want and has many different levels, and use them to make sure that when you onboard a subscription, everything's created with a single click, rather than having to manually go through and do all that. That's about all there is to blueprints. Hopefully that was useful, and I'll see you next time on Azure Snippets.